Welcome to the tutorial for the Unity Narrator story engine. Set up Unity for the project. After importing the asset into your Unity project, create a new scene. Delete the main camera, and drag these two prefabs into the hierarchy. The player. The story engine manager. Next, create a plane and reset all transforms to 0. Stretch the plane to make more room for the player, and now you can test the first-person controller. Working with triggers. Let's start with triggers. Triggers are the main part of this engine. For this example, drag a door into the scene. Then, right-click in the inspector under Story Engine, Trigger Walk to add your first trigger. Place the trigger in front of the door. As you can see, there is already a story trigger on this object. Here you can make adjustments. The trigger time setting defines how often the trigger can be activated. We will cover this in more detail later. Connecting the trigger to the door. Now we connect the trigger to the door. Select the trigger you created and add a component called Story Door Manipulator. In the lower input field, drag in the door object. To make this easier, click the lock icon in the inspector to keep the trigger selected. Now click on the door in the hierarchy to highlight it. Simply drag the door object into the field in the inspector. Then unlock the inspector again. If you want to add your own doors to the engine, check how it's set up on this example door with the story door script. The value 100 represents the rotation value the door frame uses to open. You can also configure the door to start locked or already open. Clicking on the pivot object reveals the door panel that will be rotated to open. The script will automatically manipulate its Y rotation. Testing. Now you can test it in play mode. After walking into the trigger, the door will open automatically. Back in the editor, we can change the door event from open door to closed door. If we click on the door, we can set it to open on start, so that the trigger will then close it. Now, when we step into the trigger, the door closes. There are 5 door events available: open, close, lock, unlock, close and lock, open and unlock. More details on triggers. Next, we create a cube, resize it, and place it slightly higher in the scene. We duplicate the trigger with Ctrl+D and move the new one next to the cube. After changing the trigger type to click, a new field appears. Drag the cube into this field so the cube can be clicked. Then, change the door manipulator on the new trigger to close door. Don't forget to unlock the inspector if it's still locked. Set the trigger type to always, so it can be activated more than once. Do the same for the first trigger. The first trigger should open the door, and the new one should close it. Test it. Enter play mode, click the cube, and then walk into the trigger to see if it works. With the variable type, you can use one trigger to activate another. Let's create a new trigger and place it in front of a second door. For better overview, change its color, set the type to variable, and assign it a unique variable name. Now, go back to the previous trigger. Add a story variable component and give it the same variable name. Return to the red trigger, add a door manipulator, and drag the second door into the field. As you can see, after clicking the first trigger, the variable will be set to on and will automatically trigger the red one. We start with a new trigger. Remove the unused features and assign it story physics. Next, create a sphere and place it in the scene. Position the trigger where you want it. To visualize the trigger's location more easily, create a cube and remove its collider. This step isn't necessary for a real game, but it helps you see where the trigger is. Now, drag the sphere into the target object field of the trigger. You can also set the duration for how long the physics will remain active. When we walk into the trigger, the sphere will fall down. Back in the editor, I created a small slope so the sphere can roll down after being activated. Move Player tool. We create a new trigger and add the feature Move Player. With this tool, we can change the player's position. With the first setting, the player is teleported to another position. For this example, I copy the position of the red cube, which will be our target position x equals -11 and z equals 1. When we test it, we see that after stepping into the trigger, the player is teleported to the set position. By default, the trigger works only once, since the trigger setting defines it that way. Change the setting to always, and now the trigger will work every time. Additional mode. Now let's look at the other player movement setting, additional. Stretch the trigger so the effect is easier to see. In this mode, it doesn't matter where the player stands. Every time the trigger is activated, the player's position on the x-axis will increase by 2. With the movement tool, you can move an object from one position to another without creating an animation. Let's drag a plant into the scene. We take the previous collider, remove the unused feature, and add the story movement feature. Lock the inspector and drag the object you want to move into the target field. First, save the current position so you can return the object to its starting point later. Now move the object to the desired position and save this as the target position. With a click on the button, you can reset the object back to the start position. Using time duration, you can set how many seconds it takes for the object to reach the target. After testing, you'll see that the plant smoothly moves to its target position when you walk into the trigger. With the visibility tool, you can hide or show objects in the scene. You can also hide or show other triggers. In this example, we will hide the plant after activating the trigger. Remove the unused feature of the trigger and add story visibility. Click the plus button under the Hide Object section. Lock the inspector and drag the plant into the field. Now, after the trigger is activated, the plant will disappear. To test the opposite, duplicate the plant and move it to the side. Under Show Objects, press plus and drag the second plant into this field. Unlock the inspector and disable the second plant in a hierarchy so it's hidden at the start. If you now click on the trigger, you'll see a preview of what will happen. The green arrow shows which object will appear. The red arrow shows which object will disappear. So in this case, the trigger hides one plant and shows the other. Now let's look at the music feature. Add the feature story music to a trigger. Under Music, you can assign a soundtrack from your project and set the volume. Duplicate the trigger and assign a different soundtrack to it. When you walk into the first trigger, the first music track will fade in. After walking into the second trigger, the current track will fade out and the new one will fade in. You can also leave the music field empty. This means that the currently playing music will stop when the trigger is activated. With the audio feature, you can play simple additional sounds in the scene. For example, sound effects or ambient noises. With the blackout feature, you can create smooth transitions in your game. Add the story blackout feature to a trigger. Here, you can set the fade in and fade out time, and also decide whether the player's movement should be locked during the transition.
Animation feature. If you already have a complex animation in your game, for example for a character or another object, you can start it using this feature. First, add the object and make sure it has an animator component. Then, on the trigger, add the story animator feature. Drag the object with the animator into the animator field and type the name of the target animation into the field. Now you can test it to see if it works. The story narrator is the most important feature, as it tells the story of your game. Let's see how it works. First, remove the unused feature from the trigger and add the narrator feature. Set the trigger type to once, since we only want this narration to play a single time. In this example, we have 3 sound files and 3 sentences to add. Click the plus button until you have the required number of entries. Now, add the text that will be shown to the player. Then, drag the pre-recorded narrator audio files into the corresponding slots in the feature. Finally, let's test it and see how it looks and sounds in the game.
This one is easy to explain. This is me. The voice inside your head that you keep hearing.
Finally, we have the scene changer feature. With this, you can move the player into a different scene. Add the story scene changer feature to a trigger and create a new scene. Right-click Create Scene. Give it a name and drag it onto the feature. Now double-click the new scene so we can set it up. Create a plane, remove the main camera, and drag in the player and the story engine prefab. Switch back to the main scene and test it. It works. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you have any questions or suggestions for more features, please let me know in the comment section.